This is, or was, a 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. As you can see, it's had a small front end knock, and well, I'm no genius, but the chassis seems to have moved in that direction.
A few years ago, Aston Martin refused to sell Matt Armstrong spare parts for his own car. Flat out refused. He had bought a wrecked 2019 Vantage, the kind of salvage project his entire channel is built on, and the manufacturer told him they would not supply a single component. He documented the whole ordeal for millions of viewers, sourced the parts through back channels, rebuilt the car anyway, and turned the whole saga into one of the most talked-about series on automotive YouTube. Then, in February of 2024, that same company invited that same man into the most secretive room in British motorsport and let him watch their brand-new Formula One car fire up for the first time. That reversal tells you more about where the car industry is heading than any press release ever could. The man who rebuilds wrecks. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand who Matt Armstrong is and, more importantly, who he is not. He is not a motoring journalist with 2 decades of press credentials. He is not a former racing driver with a paddock pass and industry connections going back to the 1990s. He is not an engineer. He does not have a motorsport pedigree. Matt Armstrong is a British YouTuber, automotive content creator, and former professional BMX rider who built his entire name doing something almost absurdly simple. He buys wrecked cars and puts them back together on camera. That is the whole premise. No fancy studio, no production team in the early days, just a man with a workshop, a set of tools, and a camera pointed at whatever disaster he had dragged home that week. He started with a damaged Audi TT, a project that established the format his entire channel would follow. Take something the world has written off, something an insurance company has stamped as beyond repair, and bring it back to life on camera, mistakes and all, with the audience watching every bolt, every setback, every moment where a part does not fit and the whole plan has to change. Then came the breakthrough that turned him from a niche creator into a genuine force. During the pandemic, when most content creators were struggling to find anything to film, Matt bought and restored a wrecked Bentley Continental GT. The project was long, detailed, and satisfying in the way that only a months-long mechanical resurrection can be. His audience exploded. Subscribers piled up across his channels, eventually approaching 10 million combined, with over 1 billion total views. And the key to all of it was trust. Matt Armstrong's audience does not watch him because he is polished. They watch him because he is not. He makes mistakes on camera. He shows the failures alongside the wins. He gets covered in grease and spends hours under a car chasing a problem most people would just pay someone else to fix. That authenticity, in an industry drowning in curated press launches and embargoed reviews, is worth more than any traditional media placement money can buy. So how does a man whose biggest credential is pulling a wrecked supercar out of a scrapyard end up standing inside a billion-dollar Formula One factory, watching an engine come to life for the first time? The answer starts with a company that once slammed the door in his face. The door that closed. Here is the part of this story that most coverage either skips entirely or buries at the bottom. And it is the part that makes everything that comes after so much more powerful. Years before any factory access happened, Matt Armstrong purchased a heavily damaged 2019 Aston Martin Vantage and began documenting its rebuild the way he always does, transparently, on camera, for his audience. It was supposed to be another signature project. Buy the wreck, source the parts, fix it, film it, move on. But Aston Martin had other ideas. According to discussions among automotive enthusiasts who followed the project in real time, the company told Matt they would not sell him parts for the car. A manufacturer refusing to supply components to a customer for their own vehicle, simply because of how the car had ended up in his hands. This is the kind of corporate gatekeeping that luxury car brands are notorious for. The philosophy behind it is simple. These companies want total control over their image. A wrecked car being rebuilt by a YouTuber in a garage does not fit the pristine aspirational picture they spend millions constructing. It is the same instinct that leads Ferrari to send legal threats to owners who modify their cars in ways the company does not approve of. The same instinct that famously led Ferrari to go after a well-known DJ who had wrapped his 458 in a custom livery, the company considered off-brand. The message from these manufacturers is clear. You may have bought the car, but the brand still belongs to us, and we will decide how it is presented to the world. So when Aston Martin refused to sell Matt Armstrong parts, it was not a random bureaucratic hiccup. It was a deliberate choice rooted in the same exclusivity-first thinking that governs nearly every prestige automotive brand on the planet. But Matt did not quietly drop the project. He did what he always does. He kept going. He sourced parts through alternative channels, worked around every roadblock, and showed his audience exactly what it looks like when a manufacturer turns its back on a customer. The whole saga played out in front of millions of viewers. And when Aston Martin's own representatives eventually came to inspect the rebuilt Vantage that Matt had restored largely without their help, that moment became one of the most discussed beats in his entire build series. Think about what the brand managers at Aston Martin must have been watching during all of this. A creator with a combined audience approaching 10 million people was telling a story about their company. A story of refusal, workaround, and eventual triumph. And every chapter generated more genuine engagement than almost anything their marketing department could produce. Conflict, resolution, redemption. The oldest storytelling formula in the world, playing out in real time for free on someone else's channel. And that is when something inside Aston Martin clearly shifted. Because the next time Matt Armstrong heard from them, they were not refusing to sell him parts. They were inviting him into the most expensive room in British motorsport. The room nobody gets into. To understand the scale of what Aston Martin offered Matt Armstrong, you need to understand what the AMR Technology Campus actually is. Aston Martin returned to the Formula One grid in 2021 under the leadership of Canadian billionaire Lawrence Stroll, who had bought the team and poured investment into it at a level the organization had never seen. The centerpiece of that investment was a brand new facility at Silverstone, the home of British motorsport. The AMR Technology Campus opened in the summer of 2023, and it was not a renovation or an extension of an existing building. It was an entirely new construction, the first purpose-built Formula One team headquarters in nearly 2 decades. Everything lives under one roof. The design office, the engineering department, the production floor, the commercial operations, the manufacturing line. Every prototype, every piece of carbon fiber, every component that will eventually strap a driver into a car traveling at over 200 miles per hour, all consolidated into a single state-of-the-art building. Construction continued beyond the main building, including a brand new wind tunnel, arguably the single most valuable piece of technology any F1 team can possess, because wind tunnel data is the closest thing to a crystal ball in motorsport. This is what Matt Armstrong walked into, not a museum, not a showroom, the beating heart of a billion-dollar racing operation, at the exact moment it was preparing to reveal its next car to the world. And the access did not stop at a guided tour. Matt was there for the first fire-up of the AMR 24, Aston Martin's 2024 Formula One Challenger. For anyone outside of motorsport, here is what that means. When a Formula One team fires up a new car's engine for the first time, the moment is treated like a state secret. It is the culmination of months of design, millions of pounds in development, and a power unit engineered down to the micron. Teams do not let outsiders near that room. Cameras get banned. Phones get confiscated. Even some employees are not cleared to be present. Matt Armstrong was standing in that room with a camera rolling. But it went even further than that. The mechanic in a hoodie. Aston Martin did not just give Matt a camera pass, they gave him a job. During the critical preseason window, the team put him to work on the actual Formula One car. He helped with the build of the AMR-24 in some capacity, working alongside the real mechanics in the real garage. Then, on February 12th, he joined a group of guests at Silverstone for the official launch of the car and its debut laps on the circuit. The layers of access stacked on top of each other are worth counting. First, the fire-up, the closely guarded internal moment when the engine roared to life. Second, the car build, where Matt was hands-on with components worth more than most people's houses. Third, the public launch and first track laps. That is not a VIP experience. That is a documented journey from the factory floor to the racetrack, and Aston Martin wanted every minute of it filmed and broadcast. The entire experience was supported by Valvoline, the team's official lubricants partner, and it tied into a broader campaign called Mechanics Month. Aston Martin and Valvoline invited over 30 students to the campus and trackside for hands-on experience ahead of the British Grand Prix. They launched a social media content series called Mechanics, showcasing the working lives of team technicians across the entire season. Out of every creator they could have chosen to headline that campaign, they chose the man who rebuilds wrecked cars in a garage. Not a veteran journalist, not an engineer with a degree, a guy in a hoodie with grease under his fingernails, and an audience that trusts him because he earns that trust every single video. And that choice is what makes this story a warning shot, aimed directly at the two most famous names in the automotive world. What Ferrari and Bugatti still do not understand. Here is the question that should be keeping executives at Ferrari and Bugatti awake at night. When was the last time Ferrari let a content creator film the first startup of their engine? When was the last time Bugatti allowed a YouTuber onto the production floor of the Molsheim atelier before a car had even been announced? If you cannot think of an answer, that is the point. Ferrari's approach to its brand has always been rooted in control. Total, absolute, uncompromising control. They control who buys their cars. They control how owners can resell them. They have famously blacklisted customers who sold vehicles too quickly or to buyers Ferrari did not approve of. They have been known to pursue legal action against owners who customize their vehicles in ways the company considers inconsistent with the brand. One of the most notorious examples involved a well-known electronic music producer who wrapped his Ferrari 458 in a custom livery the company found objectionable. Ferrari sent him a cease and desist letter demanding he remove the wrap from his own car. The message was unmistakable. Buying a Ferrari does not make it yours. Not fully. Not in the way that Ferrari defines ownership. Their factory tours in Maranello are carefully curated experiences designed to show visitors exactly what Ferrari wants them to see and nothing more. The mystique is the product. The exclusivity is the point. Bugatti operates from the same playbook. The Molsheim facility is so restricted that even owning a Bugatti does not guarantee a look at the production floor. Access is a privilege doled out selectively, reinforcing the message that this world is not for everyone. For a century, that strategy worked brilliantly. Mystery built desire. Exclusivity built prestige. The less people saw, the more they wanted in. But here is the problem with that strategy in 2026. Mystery does not build community. And community is what drives brand loyalty now. When Aston Martin let Matt Armstrong inside their factory, they were not just making a fun video. They were sending a message to an audience of nearly 10 million people, an audience that skews younger, that engages daily, that talks about cars not in boardrooms but in comment sections and group chats. The message was simple. We are not hiding from you. We are inviting you in. And audiences remember that. When the next generation of car buyers, the people who grew up watching Matt Armstrong pull engines apart in his garage, start deciding which brands feel like theirs versus which brands feel like untouchable relics from another era, which name do you think comes to mind first? Aston Martin is not just winning a marketing battle. They are writing the playbook for a future that Ferrari and Bugatti have not adapted to yet. The playbook nobody saw coming. The factory access was not a one-off stunt. Aston Martin has built an entire strategy around openness, and the scale of it is remarkable when you line it all up. The AMR Technology Campus now offers guided tours to fans, complete with expert guides and genuine behind-the-scenes access to a working Formula One facility. They have hosted their fan community at the campus for exclusive screenings of the Netflix series Drive to Survive, with full tours and meet and greets with team personnel. They have brought students from schools into the facility for immersive experiences focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, combining tours of the technology campus with trackside access to watch racing sessions, a guided tour of an active Formula One factory available to regular fans. Compare that to the fortress mentality at Maranello or Molsheim, and the philosophical gap between these companies becomes enormous. And here is the financial angle that almost nobody discusses. Formula One teams are locked in a constant battle, not just for podiums but for sponsorship money. Sponsors care about one thing above almost everything else: reach, visibility, engagement numbers that justify the millions they spend to put their logo on a car. A single video of Matt Armstrong experiencing the fire-up of the AMR 24, filmed through the eyes of a creator with a combined audience approaching 10 million subscribers and over 1 billion total views, does not just entertain fans. It becomes a marketing asset with a shelf life measured in years, not days. It gets watched, clipped, shared, and discussed long after a traditional press release has been buried under the next news cycle. So when you really break it down, Aston Martin did not just open a door for Matt Armstrong. They opened a door for themselves into a marketing model that their competitors have not figured out yet and may not figure out until the advantage is already gone. The reversal that tells the whole story. And that brings us back to where we started, because the most powerful part of this entire story is not the factory, it is not the fire-up, it is not the billion-dollar campus, or the marketing strategy, or the tours. It is the reversal. A company that refused to sell spare parts to a YouTuber for his own car later handed that same YouTuber a camera and a front-row seat to the most secretive moment in their entire racing operation. That is not just a change in policy. That is a complete reversal of philosophy. And it happened because someone at Aston Martin watched the Vantage saga unfold in front of millions of viewers and understood something that Bugatti and Ferrari have not yet been willing to accept. The old playbook is dying. The control everything, reveal nothing, treat your audience like they should be grateful approach is quietly becoming obsolete. The brands that will win the next generation are not the ones that build the highest walls. They are the ones that open the doors and trust their audience to walk through them. Matt Armstrong walked through that door in a hoodie, with no press credentials and no motorsport pedigree, and came out the other side having witnessed something that seasoned Formula One journalists with decades of relationships in the paddock do not get to see. He watched an engine fire up for the first time. He put his hands on a car that would race at over 200 miles per hour. He stood on a factory floor that took 20 years to plan and build, surrounded by technology that rival teams would pay fortunes to glimpse for even 5 minutes. And he filmed the whole thing for an audience that has never set foot inside a racing facility and probably never will, but who now feel like they have, because one company decided to let them in through the eyes of someone they trust. How long can Ferrari afford to stay closed when the team down the road just handed the keys to a man who fixes wrecked cars for a living, and 10 million people watched him walk in? How long can Bugatti afford to treat its production floor like a state secret when a competitor is turning theirs into a destination? The walls came down at Silverstone. They came down for a man in a hoodie with an audience bigger than most television networks. And every day those walls stay up at Maranello. And Molsheim is another day the next generation of car buyers learns to love the brand that let them in and forget the ones that never did. Aston Martin went from refusing to sell parts to opening the factory. Matt Armstrong went from a wrecked Audi TT to a Formula One garage. The walls came down, and they are not going back up the same way again. If you liked this, hit like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos.